If you have a career, then you have stories to tell, and I want to hear them. Welcome to this episode of Control Alt Story, a podcast where I go through the career journeys of people who work in and with technology, dive into career advice, and share some fun stories along the way. So my guest today is Sunil Murthy. He is a watsonx technical leader for the U.S. national market. Here in just a second, he's going to tell us what that is. But before we get rolling, I just want to mention this episode, I think, is going to be a little bit different than some of the other ones. We were both at IBM's TechXchange conference in Las Vegas. As of the recording of this, that was last week. So I really want to spend a lot of time as part of this episode focusing on TechXchange, the things that Sunil learned, the things that he would like to share, any kind of news. I want to start by kind of going into his current role, his background, and things like that. But I just want to go ahead before we get rolling to mention, a large portion of this is going to be about IBM's TechXchange conference. So with that being said, like I said, you're the watsonx technical leader for the U.S. national market. We're going to learn a little bit more about that from you, what exactly that means. From my perspective, you are just like the ultimate go-to. I think I recently in some email or somewhere referred to you as the watsonx wizard. So that's kind of what I think. Fantastic person, a lot of information, a lot of knowledge, and always extremely helpful. So yeah, tell us about your role today.
I like the WW aspect of Watson Wizard.
There you go.
Hey, Josh, thanks for having me, and it's great to be here with you. In terms of my role, daily role is essentially solving customers' AI concerns and issues, and as well as adoption questions. A lot of times, we hear a lot of the next turn of the technology, and customers, have to understand how does that fit into their business and what are the technical differentiation and aspects. So in my role, day-to-day role, I work with folks like yourselves, working with our customers to communicate the value and the technology capabilities from IBM Watson.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you're essentially traveling wherever you're needed, right? It's not like you're just in one location, one client. You're all over the place.
Absolutely. So currently, my role takes me wherever the customers are and across the United States as well. And for the most part, it's been so I live out on the West Coast, and there are quite a few customers on the West Coast, but a lot of the customers are all over the country, and that's one of the fun things about the role as well, right? It's about you see customers at various stages of adoption, at various levels of understanding, and the variation, is one of the most exciting part of the role. Is to go and meet these customers. Give you an example. I was at Salt Lake City with one of our customers who've been in the railroad business for over 100 years.
Wow.
And IBM being in the business for over 100 years as well. It was one of those things where you have to recognize the technical debt of these companies and bridge that to the newer capabilities and really help understand the transition, right? Without impacting their day-to-day business. And they're in the insurance business. So it is very important that the business doesn't see any downturn. That's one of the things that we pride as well. As you know, as IBM, we really have been through the journey of the customers through these decades of technology churns. And that's one thing that we can bridge very well with the old, with the new.
Yeah, and that touches on a topic that I have addressed a couple of times on the podcast when I've interviewed people, just essentially talking about, IBM's been around forever. Why is that? Why are we still relevant in 2024? So I think you touched on it there as well. I would like for you to, if you don't mind, go back and just kind of paint the picture for us of your career journey. What led you to this point? Maybe some of your other roles, and maybe fun story or two along the way as you've worked with IBM for 24 years, I believe is what we talked about earlier.
Oh, Josh, I thought this will be more focused on Tech Exchange. How much time do we have? It's
We'll get the abbreviated version. Yeah, we'll jump into Tech Exchange, but we gotta gotta let everybody know all about you a little bit.
it's amazing to have a company like IBM where you can perform so many different functions and roles and responsibilities. At the core, it's about being relevant to the customers and the market, right? So just to give you a overview of my career, I started off, really working as a professional Java developer and architect within IBM when Java was new to the companies. When internet has just taken off, and companies were looking at how do they tap into the internet, just like companies are today trying to figure out how to tap into the AI. It was e-business. Companies wanted to bring forward their existing businesses to tap into the electronic or e-business aspects to this one. And Java was one of the programming languages. But why Java? Why focus on a platform to build those applications to take advantage of the internet, of things and internet applications. So I started my career there as an architect. I had a global role. That was one of the fascinating things. You kind of alluded to some of the fun stories. I was relatively new global traveler at the time, and I had just gotten my American passport and traveled to Europe for the very first time. And the schedule was such that I went from London to Paris to Milan in basically in a matter of 4 days because of the wonderful train infrastructure out there in Europe, as you know. The fun thing was, and Europe, you typically do, business, dress and be ready to meet with the customers where they are. Milan was interesting. Milan, our customer meeting was right in the middle of a fashion show happening during that fashion week in Milan. And IBM was featured as one of the speakers for one of the companies who were core for the fashion show. So, needless to say, we had to wear those Milan designer clothing and participate as part of the fashion, exhibition and show as well. So,
You get to go down the runway or anything like that, or?
Well, our presentation was on the runway. Yes.
Oh my
So in
goodness.
effect, I did go. Of course, with my colleagues as well. I was not the smartest looking on the group, but needless to say, I dressed smart. But there were several such experiences. Global roles in and of itself within IBM gives you that variation of just like I mentioned, even within our country where customers are at different levels, when you travel globally, you also notice the different, layers of adoption within our customers and different maturity levels, different levels of understanding. Why IBM? Always that comes up in terms of question, as well as the cultural differences and business variations. So I worked with many different industries in my career. And again, going back to the best part about working for IBM is you can do different roles. So I've done business partner relationship management. I've done business development, product management. I launched a new product in my career to basically take advantage of the service-oriented architecture. I did sales and technical sales, which is the role that I'm in currently. That's something that's near and dear to me because it really helps to bridge the value of the technology to the value that can be realized by our customers. It's kind of bridging that gap and bringing that technical depth skills required. So I started my career in the Java, in the service-oriented architecture, what used to be referred to as middleware. Then I moved over to database, data warehouse, big data, and then early stages of Watson. And then I did, quite a bit of data fabric and data governance technology effort. And about 2 years or so, I've been focused on the generative AI piece. I started working on non-IBM generative AI. This is, again, the fun part of being at IBM. I was part of a team within consulting focused on AWS Bedrock, as well as Azure with OpenAI, before coming over to the watsonx team beginning of 2024 this year. So hopefully that gives you a sense of all the various roles and iterations that I've been. But the best part about this was bringing relevant capabilities from IBM every step along the way, and working with variety of different fantastic people across both the customers and IBM. So that's what I would say is kind of sums up the experience part.
Well, I think that's actually, because I didn't know all the different things that you've been involved with over the years, and I think that's really great for our customers, for our clients, because when you go in to talk to them about watsonx, you're not just coming in as like, oh, I'm a generative AI. You're like, well, I'm a generative AI guy today, but also I know how that's going to play with your data. I know that's going to play, everything else, right? So I think that's fantastic, and I think that speaks to your success in this role.
And you mentioned a critical piece there. It's the data, right? There is the data piece is still customer struggle. And I've seen in my career us an industry solving the data problem in terms of quality, in terms of access, in terms of policies over multiple decades, right? So the data piece is a critical piece that customers still struggle, and my experience with that really helps. And to your point, we are going through the next turn in terms of our IT landscape and technology landscape and applications. The background in applications, service-oriented architecture. The enterprise application is also critical, right? If you think about what customers are trying to do, they're really trying to tap into the power of AI in the context of their enterprise applications. So, I think there are a couple of statistics where, we anticipate, almost, 6 million or so enterprise applications that will get modernized in the next, 24 months or less. So, if you think about the gravity of that groundswell of application modernization, leveraging the AI architecture, which is, the building blocks are different than what it used to be last decade, then, you start to realize the announcements that IBM made, that I know you were there as well last week at TechXchange, and we made a bunch of announcements there. It starts to make sense in terms of why these announcements are relevant in the context of those enterprise application modernization to tap into the power of AI.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a great, great time for us to get into TechXchange, since you let us right into it. So we were talking a little bit before about our approach for this podcast, for this episode, and when we were thinking of TechXchange, you and I talked about you want to kind of put this into 3 different categories, and we're going to kind of dive into each of those. So the 3 categories that we talked about are enabling greater developer productivity, IBM's approach to models fit for purpose, and trust in AI. So we can start from the beginning, which is enabling greater developer productivity. And yeah, just, from a TechXchange perspective, tell us all about that. And, for anyone listening who maybe needs a little extra information, kind of just what exactly that means, right?
Absolutely. So I think a lot of these things will be also made available as part of our community outreach with our customers. So highly encourage folks listening in to look at, and join IBM's developer community to get more information. And before I get into the details, you kind of alluded to what did I learn, and what did I really appreciate at a event like Technical Exchange, or TechXchange for short. It's the fact that you have all these different customers and users and consumers of our technology, both business partners and customers, sharing their experiences and being very open and candid about what worked, what did not, and share the best practices and lots of hands-on. Right. I mean, that's what I loved, customers sharing with me that they spend a lot of time hands-on. In fact, I spent time going into the first area, which is the developer productivity announcements. I spent some time really talking to product teams and getting my hands on this new announcement, which was the developer toolkit that we announced. Essentially, what this developer toolkit does is to provide a developer user experience. It's a simplified low code, no code set of tools. As you know, folks in AI world use frameworks like Llama Index, PyTorch, and several others, including our own watsonx flow engine. These things have to be integrated in the form of a framework that customers can really take advantage of in the form of APIs and SDKs. And as you know, IBM is a very open platform where you can leverage what IBM does, but also bring in the open innovation from open standards. So we support the third-party models, which is state-of-the-art models, and provide that patterns, which I mentioned that was shared quite a bit, to streamline your AI development process. And if you think about development process in the sense of framework, you need access to data, you need integration frameworks to integrate with your existing lay of the land in terms of your technology investments, and more importantly, governance, which I know we'll touch upon later. So this developer toolkit was a new announcement, and it's basically brings in this notion of building agentic workflows. And for listeners and for folks wondering what that is, that's the new, if you will, standard of introducing the notion of agents, which is the evolution of assistants, which we've been in the market and offering Watson Assistant and now watsonx Assistant for over a decade. The agents is essentially the next iteration of providing that iterative, interactive, sort of autonomous process flow or task flow. So we introduced the notion of agentic workflow capability. That's an agent builder. We introduced ease of integrating with the platform with the API, as I mentioned. There is also quite a bit of requests from customers for fine-tuning. If you think about models that you can leverage, we know retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, has been sort of the most adopted pattern. But we're also seeing customers wanting to leverage their data within the model. And with IBM, because of the fact that you have a trustworthy platform and trusted model through the notion of Granite, which is IBM's model, you now have something called as Instruct Lab, which was announced earlier, but is now integrated into watsonx for fine-tuning. So you have as part of this developer toolkit, you have Instruct Lab fine-tuning toolkit. So you can essentially bring the skills of the subject matter expert who is trying to leverage the customer or enterprise data and knowledge, so skills and knowledge, and provide that ability to incorporate that as part of fine-tuning, as part of the models. The other part was quick start guides. There's so much of experience and hundreds of projects that IBM has done over the past almost 2 years now, right? Since we announced watsonx, a year and a half plus. There's quite a few documented approaches, and IBM has done over 1,000 or so projects. We probably crossed 2,000 at this point. So you have all these quick start guides capturing those best practices. So what are those? RAG templates. So I mentioned RAG being one of the primary things. So integration support for these frameworks, LangChain, Llama Index, PyTorch. We also announced Crew AI. Crew AI provides that agentic workflow building capabilities. We introduced the integration with Crew AI, and we also provided watsonx.ai API because it eases the integration. Say you're deploying in a NVIDIA NIM, which is the NVIDIA inference microservices. watsonx.api is right there for you to leverage as well. So I spoke a lot about, agentic workflows, templates, frameworks. These are essentially, being offered as part of this developer toolkit that really simplifies enterprise kind of grade application or AI application development, which I think most of the, effort will fall under that agentic workflow or agent builder use cases. So let me pause there.
Absolutely.
Quite a bit on that first piece.
No, no, that was great. Do you want to go ahead and get into number two, or?
We can.
Okay.
So the second area was really in the Granite model, which is IBM's Granite model. I saw a statistic where, IBM Granite model, this is the Stanford Trustworthy Index. IBM Granite model is one of the most trustworthy models. We were not even in the leaderboard, a few months back. Now we are, in one of the most trusted models. So what did IBM announce last week? We open sourced and announced two models, which is 2 billion and 8 billion parameter model, right? So, these are, as you can tell from the number of parameters, considered smaller than the 90 billion or 400 billion models that you hear are out there in the marketplace. I think OpenAI will probably get to 1 trillion very soon, right? If not already.
That's gonna be cheap to run, right?
That's gonna be very cheap to run, right? Yeah.
I hope everyone listening detects the sarcasm.
Yeah. I mean, think about inferencing a trillion parameter model. That's going to be very expensive for enterprises. So what IBM's philosophy is to do the tasks that you do typically with AI, agents, assistants, applications, you need, purpose-built, fit-for-purpose models. That's why the 2 billion and 8 billion, parameter model are open, fit for purpose, highly performant, and in terms of cost, it's very very economic from an enterprise point of view. So these are used for a variety of applications. I mentioned RAG a little bit, but also agentic support, summarization, entity extraction, classification, and a lot more. So these were announced. By the way, these are large language models. But they're also, the 8 billion is a mixture of expert models. So, and under Apache 2.0 license, right? So you, with the IBM indemnification backing. So you have all the ingredients of not only leveraging an open, truly open model, but you also have the price performance that the enterprises need for a fit for purpose a model that companies can leverage. So I would say, those are some of the key things, and we are seeing some cost efficiency, scalability metrics that we've been able to release with all the available benchmarks. It is truly state of the art, and it delivers these enterprise tasks, including integrating with cybersecurity, which I'll touch upon in a little bit, and there's also announcements of Granite Guardian models. This is fascinating, Josh, because if you think about, the guardrails that you need within the models, the Guardian model, which is the Granite Guardian, can really provide those guardrails and it's trained with those guardrails, things like hate abuse profanity filter, hallucination tracking, and the level of safety that you need. I think there are over 15 or so safety benchmarks. So this is a model that's trained just from a perspective of guardrails. So that's the that's the Granite Guardian. By the way, this is what we use internally as well for our next piece, which we'll talk about, which is the governance piece. So
And
let me
before we
pause
get into
there.
that, I
Yeah.
did want to go back to one thing. You mentioned the indemnification, and we kind of moved on. I did want to go back to that really quick, just to make sure, dive a little bit deeper on that for anyone who is not aware. What that means is, IBM stands by their models, the Granite models. They, believe, these are models built for business. We have only trained these on data that is needed, is appropriate. We're not training this on the worst parts of the internet or whatever the case may be. And if
Mhm.
you are using these models on the watsonx platform, you have that IP indemnification, and there is not a dollar cap on that unless that has changed in the last 30 minutes or something. There's not a dollar cap on that as well. So I just wanted
Correct.
to, I think I said everything there, but kind of want to get your thoughts on there if you had anything else to sprinkle in on that. Because I
Yeah,
think
there
that's a
is.
really key, especially as we consider what we're about to get into, which is around trust and AI and governance.
You summarized it very well. So there's IP, there's also copyright, right? And these two aspects from an enterprise perspective are obviously crown jewels and need to be protected. And as you rightly said, the indemnification, the IBM stands behind that holistically, and there is really, and it fully, completely indemnifies whoever is using IBM Granite model. And we extend that indemnification also for the Mistral models as well. So the Mistral models, that which is mixture of expert models, that one is also indemnified. So you get that level of indemnification. By the way, a lot of the times when you hear indemnification, vendors providing large language models, they want the customers to indemnify them.
Right.
Only then the vendor indemnifies. It's like a circular logic, which customers need to pay attention to those terms and conditions. But IBM doesn't require customers to indemnify us. We just indemnify the usage of those models, and we stand behind that. There's no cap to that. So I think that's a very important aspect, and that's one of the core pillars of trust for an AI for business. These are core principles that we continue to operate on, and those kind of are the building blocks to deliver that to the enterprises.
One more
Yep.
quick question before we get into the third section around trust and governance. We're talking about the newer models, the 8 billion, the 2 billion. Would
Mhm.
you consider those to be, I've read a little bit about SLMs or small language models. Would you consider those to be SLMs at that point? Or is there a line where they need to be a little bit smaller to be considered an SLM?
I think the 2 billion would probably fall more under the SLM. But you're talking about SLMs in the probably hundreds of millions of parameters. So these could be and you could consider anything below 2 billion to be essentially SLM from my point of view. I don't know if there's an industry definition to that, but clearly a small language model is purpose built. And if you take for example a very specific domain, for example healthcare, and if you train a particular model, and if you can get it in within that, a billion or less than that parameter, you're getting a domain specific model, and it's a on the smaller spectrum, from a spectrum, it's on the smaller side, smaller end of the spectrum. It just makes everything economical, right? Cheaper to train, cheaper to inference, cheaper to maintain. If you do fine tuning and if you deploy that, it's cheaper to deploy. So and on that point about deployment, I worked with a healthcare customer where they were concerned about take fine tuning a model and making it available and deploying it in the cloud. That's one nice thing about IBM's models. It's truly hybrid, right? So these are based off Red Hat, OpenShift AI and RHEL AI, and so these can be the models can be deployed within a customer's data center. The same thing, exact same thing, can be taken and deployed on AWS, Same thing on Azure or Google Cloud or any other cloud. So that's one of the consistency that enterprises appreciate. To your point about us deploying, and I think small language models gives that flexibility of deploying in these different environments. And one other point, we are seeing customers, actually, we had one customer last week where they spoke about deploying it in a hyper-converged infrastructure. IBM offers one called Fusion HCI, hyper-converged infrastructure. Dell offers a similar one. So you have this hyper-converged infrastructure, which is, like a bookcase, right? Size of a bookcase. It's got, GPUs, maybe up to 4 GPUs. It's got storage, or it could, span out to the network to access S3 buckets and whatnot. It's got built-in InfiniBand networks, and, it's got the compute. So you've got everything in this hyper-converged infrastructure, including the GPUs, to run these models. And that's why the size of the model matters. To your point, going back to your SLM, small language model. So both these 2 billion and 8 billion parameter model from IBM can be deployed within that 4 GPU hyper-converged infrastructure, which makes it very, very efficient. And really, for a lot of the customers worried about PII leakage, especially in a highly regulated industry, things such as complying to regulations and other audit requirements, this could be a very viable option in terms of having that consistency, but having that flexibility to deploy it on-prem, data center, on the cloud. Make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
By the way, you have the TechXchange shirt, and I'm wearing the watsonx shirt. It's usually you wearing the watsonx shirt.
I
right?
know. I bought this there, and I was like, you know what, this would be the perfect time to wear it. It's very soft, so that they did whoever made these, they did a great job. They're very soft. So unfortunately, the drawstring on my the first time I washed it, right when I got back from TechXchange, during the dryer, it pulled it completely out. So I don't know what happened there, but I don't know if it must have got caught on something.
See, that part was not designed by AI. The graphics was designed by AI, I'm sure.
And for anyone who's listening to the audio only version, there's a reason to go check out the video version that'll be available on YouTube, so you can see the shirts and the hoodies, right?
There you go.
All right, so now we'll get into the third of our little categories here, and maybe the most important one, maybe not. That's up for debate, I guess. So around trust in AI and governance. So let you take the stage on that one.
Absolutely. So we spoke about watsonx.ai, which is our platform for large language models and our developer toolkit. We didn't cover watsonx.data. That's our data piece. The piece that we are alluding to now or getting into now, it falls under the trust and governance piece, which is the watsonx.governance. So we are seeing just a huge demand for watsonx.governance because IBM is really thought through the overall scheme of things. So first, let me explain what the functionality is, and then we'll get into the announcements, which actually is pretty exciting. So whenever you have AI undertaking or initiative, you start off with a justification of AI, with a use case, right? With a need, with a team exploring. So when we think about governance, starting from the use case, starting from what are the prompts and the language models that you're using, what's the output that this use case generates, and who are all the users of this use case, and to really provide that mechanism of approving before anything gets operationalized, that's built into the watsonx governance. So it provides that tools, the workflows, the necessary model management, if you will, the lifecycle governance and management for traditional AI, which is machine learning and generative AI assets. So that in essence is watsonx governance, right? So with watsonx governance, you can kind of proactively detect and mitigate risk, right? Meet some of the ethical concerns, support the compliance requirements, regulatory requirements like European Union AI Act, for example. And by the way, a lot of regulations keep changing, as well as internal policies. And speaking of policies, this is one of the first new announcement, right? The policies, when we started to think about the governing policies for AI, customers came to us and said, well, I've got a set of security policies already, and I want to kind of incorporate kind of those security policies into my AI governance policies, which formulate the overarching enterprise policies. So that was the first announcement we made. We kind of made this joint announcement with IBM Guardium, which is our data security and policy management software called Guardium. We introduced this, this integration with security policies that are in Guardium, and bringing that in as a holistic integrated governance console for the AI governance piece. So that was the first piece with the Guardium integration. The second piece was, when you think about AI use case, when you think about all these prompts and prompt templates and, AI assets that you build out, leveraging different frameworks that we kind of alluded to, like LangChain and, others, you need an ability to kind of, holistically look at reviewing these, AI assets. So we introduced this notion of an evaluation studio with governance. So think about, reviewing every asset in the AI lifecycle. Now you have an ability to really evaluate holistically all these assets as a collection, right? And automate some of those, guardrails that you want to incorporate. And it does reduce the time and effort to kind of manage all these individual piece parts and AI as assets. So, that's an evaluation studio that basically provides you, assessments and results against some of your criteria, which could be quantitative as well as, some of your qualitative, criteria, dashboards, that you can say, for this particular use case, these assets make the most sense. It allows, folks to decide which one I want to operationalize and which one I want to test out more. So it becomes a very critical piece of the overall AI lifecycle. And by the way, this is where I get most excited. The watsonx governance is very, very platform agnostic. Of course, we have our own platform, watsonx.ai, but I worked with AWS for a couple of years. I know there are thousands of customers using AWS framework. We integrate with AWS SageMaker from a governance perspective. You're using OpenAI, sure. You have Azure and OpenAI. We work with OpenAI, Azure from a governance piece. So bring any third-party model, have that integrated governance layer with watsonx governance, and it kind of also provides that hybrid flexibility, whether you want to have governance in the cloud or governance in-house, where all your AI assets could be in the cloud. So it's really providing that comprehensive aspect of platform governance, risk, compliance, and lifecycle governance for your AI. So I get very excited, as you can tell, with this particular piece, because it is something that every single customer want to understand, and it does have a lot of, very pertinent value in the AI initiative for anyone.
And I appreciate the excitement. I'm trying to remember, there was some meeting. We brought you into a client meeting a couple of months ago, and I remember they started describing their use case, and I remember you were on camera and you got so excited. It was a lot of fun to see.
Yeah, I do that quite sometimes, because this customer that you and I we're in the same meeting. We're basically describing to me what is an ideal use case for governance, and they didn't know that we had something to solve their problem. So that's the excitement piece. a couple more things. We introduced auto AI RAG metrics. So anybody doing RAG, you get metrics for analyzing how your RAG is performing in terms of PII, HAP, hate, abuse, profanity, or any of the content grounding aspect that you're looking at from a RAG metrics. The other thing is our general guardrails that I mentioned with the Granite Guardian model. Those 15 plus safety benchmarks, which is industry standard, is part of our watsonx governance offering as well. So it's really truly comprehensive from that point of view.
Absolutely.
Makes
So
sense?
yeah, absolutely. I want to ask you as well, and this is outside of, kind of the categories we were talking about, but overall, yeah, as you're walking the convention center halls, you're going into the hands-on labs, what's your overall uh, thoughts on TechXchange? I mean, when I was there, I felt like there really was a lot of excitement. I could hear a lot of people saying, very positive things, a lot of champions walking around, IBM champions, general excitement, people excited about the hands-on labs. I just kind of want to see what your thoughts were.
Well, yeah, and the champions, you like the blue jacket, right? That they got with IBM champions. Um, I think it's a time in our industry where everybody is looking at getting their skills updated, making it relevant to what their current IT investments are, and how do they tap into the innovation and evolution. It's inevitable that AI is going to impact every single one of us, just like internet did that, right? But there are statistics that seem to indicate, where internet affected businesses, AI is impacting, really at an accelerated fashion, maybe even 10 times, 20 times faster than the internet adoption. So there was a general acceptance of the fact that AI is going to significantly impact in every single one of the IT landscape. We spoke a little bit about what watsonx offers, but there are so many other parameters. Things like I heard, what are we doing on the data world, right? I mean, there's no AI without data, but there's a whole bunch of AI for data that you can apply. Things like metadata, curation for your data cataloging. Heard the term data intelligence in terms of analyzing the lineage of where the data sources come from for your AI, which is a phenomenal thing that IBM provides with our data lineage and data observability. And this is the data intelligence evolution from data fabric, right? So that's the other thing. I touched briefly about data security with Guardium and how we are bringing those security aspects. What are the other things I heard? There was a big focus on automation, both from a business perspective, right? The evolution of business process into agentic workflows, that's automation from a business process. There's also IT automation from triaging your, IT observability, things like Turbonomic, Instana from IBM, right? There's applying AI aspects on automating some of that. How can AI help there? There was also talk a whole lot of discussion about some of the other areas, which we didn't really, we'll probably have to do a whole different section on, some of the other aspects, things like security and collaboration and things of that nature. But, that's what I heard most of the time. Customers from a hands-on perspective was extremely helpful because these hands-on, by the way, these will be available for everybody to get more in depth. And if you need access to these, you have to reach out to your IBM contacts, because some of the hands-on, the customer sitting next to me, where this is exactly what I'm going through. Give you an example. I have a data warehouse. I have Netezza, which is our data warehouse. I have Teradata, which is another data warehouse. I have Snowflake, cloud data warehouse. The hands-on basically took the use case of these data warehouses and offloading the data into Apache Iceberg format with watsonx.data to lower the cost of these data warehouses, right? Because not all data is warm or hot. There's a lot of data that's cold, right? From historical perspective. So, but then what was even more aha moment was when I query with Presto, or what we call as Watson query, it actually does a federated query of both the cold data and the hot data. So you don't have to worry about where you're storing your data because you're saving cost, both your data warehouses and your lakehouse, but you're also leveraging the querying mechanism so that you can get the required responses irrespective of where the data is stored. That's just one example of the relevancy of the hands-on to the real use cases and real deployments out there with our customers. The other exciting thing was Instruct Lab fine tuning. That's a fascinating hands-on. I mean, I was able to download a model, use my data, fine tune the model, deploy it, and this was literally 4 or 5 hours. Of course, I had a very good Apple Mac M3. No, I don't get paid by Apple, but that was a very, and it was quantized model. So it was running on that Mac with an M3 chip, of course, 16 gig of RAM. So it was fascinating to see that in a matter of 4 hours. Josh, what used to take me on the cloud, it took me several hours and more expensive. That nowadays you can do these things with, just a very powerful, laptop. So those are some of the exciting things. We are just, again, basically giving some of the highlights here. There are some public blogs that we should actually put out links as part of this podcast. If I'll send you some, maybe you can share that with. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, is it exciting? I hope people go back and take a look at some of these things.
Well, I mean, I was there, but when you're there, there's only so much that you can see and discover. So, I mean, there are things that I learned today, and I know that I'm excited. There were several things. I do want to be respectful of your time. I know we're coming up on our scheduled time, but I did want to ask one additional question. And, of course, if you have any other thoughts, want to make sure you're able to share those. But at the beginning of this podcast, we talked a lot about, what you do today, your career. I have to ask though, when you were a child, but what did you want to do? What did you want to be?
With Presto, when I was a child, I wanted to fly the plane and be a pilot, fly all over the world. It was one of those dreams of, Fly Like an Eagle song. Yeah, if you remember that. It's one of those things which really, it was a, kind of dream big, aspect as a child. I come from, a very poor Indian family, immigrated, when I was young, and for all practical purposes, I didn't really. I mean, I dreamed big, but I didn't, know that I'd be as lucky as I am today to actually work with the greatest technology company and with the greatest technology and great customers. So this is what dreams can do, right? You dream big. I would never imagine of being a pilot, but that's what I wanted to be. But the aspiration really propels your decisions as you grow and helps you keep that motivation up. And every turn across in my career, in my life, very grateful for some of the opportunities, and it's really I think we are really at early stages of this next crank of the technology world with AI, and I couldn't be more exciting. I mean, imagine that, right? After 24 years at IBM, we are still acting like a startup, which we are. We are not the same, old legacy IBM. We are the new IBM, and it's exciting because this is the next era for at least the next decade, if you will, of how enterprises are going to be looking at this set of technology, and how are they going to incorporate to really propel their businesses. There's a statistic that 60-70% of Fortune 500 companies, what used to be in 1990s, are no longer in the business, right? So it's if a company like IBM has been around for over 100 years, you would imagine, and not going out of business, we came close perhaps, but we still survived. You have to be relevant, right? And you have to really provide something of value. And the role that you and I do in technical sales and the technology with watsonx provides really allows us to provide that relevancy and provide that value to our customers. So that's what excites me. I know you mentioned about a child, and I mentioned the pilot, but I thought it was very important to relate what that really helped me to get to.
Right.
Hopefully, that inspires a lot of folks out there to dream big and not give up.
Yeah, and even though you're not actively flying the plane, you're at least because of IBM, you've gotten to travel to all kinds of places all across the world. So at least that part of it,
You know
ended
what?
up
You're
having.
absolutely right. Why do you think I traveled? I think probably more than 70 plus countries in my career.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So I didn't exactly become a pilot, but I did fly a lot. Yes.
Yeah, you're very near the pilots. A lot of different ones.
That's right, Josh.
All right. Well, before we wrap this up, I just want to give you a chance. If there are any final comments, questions, anything, I just want to make sure anything you missed. I just want to give you a chance to say it.
Well, you know what? I really appreciate what you do and the opportunity that you provide to share the excitement, and really communicate what we do in IBM. We didn't really cover a whole lot of things, but hopefully we'll have other speakers cover things like the code assistant, which has taken over the developer world, and coming from a Java developer, now you can actually write code. You don't have to write code, but you can generate code with watsonx Code Assistant. That's pretty exciting, which we didn't really cover. But again, I'll share some of the links that you can probably share with the team. Um, the only other thing is, if you're doing AI projects, I think looking at IBM very closely and what we do is probably going to benefit anyone looking at this seriously from a business point of view. We are not in the consumer business, but we are in the B2B business. But that's where we shine, and hopefully we can offer that value and share the lessons learned moving forward. Again, I appreciate the opportunity, Josh. Looking forward for more. With
Absolutely. I appreciate having you here. And I'll just go ahead and proactively say appreciate all the help that I'm sure you're going to give me over the next year or however long. So I'll be reaching out to you with some kind of question or some kind of something. So definitely
You
appreciate you
bet.
always being willing to help.
You bet. My pleasure.
Thank you for checking out this episode of Control Alt Story. My name is Josh Spurgeon, and I'm a watsonx technical specialist at IBM. I can also be found under the name Data Nerd Josh on various social media platforms such as YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn.